Perhaps you think I am too hard on you. Always complaining that you're off, looking for the latest, the best haunting that you can know. Let me tell you of my sole example. It was, 15 years ago or more. I was with my old friend, Mr. Long. Abner Long. He's dead now. We were playing golf off at Aldborough, where the flat marshes reach like a pencil, like a line towards the sea. Where those little martel forts. And before them, the old Saxon burhs. And before them, the relics of the counts of the Saxon shore. And then, where mist meets sea, grey and white, and always you can hear it, that far sound, again and again and again, as the sea meets the land, and the waves beat like the beatings of time. We had taken, it was the off-season, we had taken this apartment, Mr. Long, Abner and I. We were going to play golf. It is the finest golfing area, so flat. And both of us were novices in the game, determined to make a difference by this trip. And as I said, it was the off-season, so we had a lounge to ourselves and 2 bedrooms. It was very comfortable. It was the end of the second day. A nervy little chap, who people had told us was called Mr. Purnell, bumbled into our room, and he looked at us with furtive eyes and said, "Sorry, is this a private sitting room?" And Mr. Long and Abner said, "Well, it was," pointedly. And Mr. Purcell was about to go out, but I thought to myself, well, I and Abner are just going to sit here and read newspapers at each other, and this chap looks like he needs to talk. So I invited him in, I gave him a fine glass of the best port, and I asked him to tell us about himself. And he looked into the fire and said, "I came here a fortnight ago. I was so happy." A fortnight ago I first heard of it. Heard of what? I was in a village, I'm not going to tell you where, but it was less than 6 miles from here. And I was looking at the church porch. It has a fine church porch, one of the finest I had seen. The porch was older and better than the church. And I was looking at the 3 crowns on the lintel of the church. Pre-Norman, it seemed. It had a square lintel, you see. A very fine carving for that period. When I think he might have been the verger, came up to me and said, "You Maronite crowns, do you know the story of those crowns? Those stories of those crowns and the Aggies that watched them? You will ask the vicar." And just at that moment, the vicar came by. And, well, I was shown the church, which I wasn't interested in. And then the vicar took me, knowing I was an antiquarian, into his study. And he showed me all kinds of things, some interesting, some less so. And then I said, "What about the 3 crowns?" And he said, now that's a tale worth telling. Those 3 crowns were buried at the time of the Vikings to keep this land safe from invasion. 3 Saxon crowns from the kingdoms that once were here and vanished into the sea. Now, I had heard that legend. Everybody knows it. It's the very badge of Essex. And I said, well, what of them? Well, he said, well, one crown, they say John Dee melted down, well, centuries ago. Another crown was in a lost palace, 6 miles away or so, but the sea encroached and vanished. And the third? I know nothing, said the vicar. Only what the foolish people tell me, that it lies not far from here. And Jaegers? An ancient family that watched them. I know nothing, than that the last died recently, in a parish not so far from here that I am rector of. And that the rumour was he had ruined his health, sitting out. That during the panic of 1870, he had never left those trees in which he was, and that had made him ruin his health. And again, during the Boer War, men looked to see the light in the trees. That at the end he became obsessed that he was the last of the line. I remember he came to me and asked me to try and write to his cousin in Australia, asking him to come on family business. But the cousin didn't come, and Acre died. Now, where did he live? But the rector would say no more. But don't you see, it was fate. I went to a little bookshop in that village, a second-hand bookshop, rare to find, I thought. And the first thing was a family Bible, and I opened it, and on the very first page, there was a list. This by as God is my salvation, this book is my redemption, it read. And the first was a name from the 18th century. William Acre, Duncan Acre, William Acre, all the way to a last one. Born in 1860. William Acre. And then much more recently, he had written ... And there was not an address, but a village nearby. So on the off chance, I went to that village, and I went into the graveyard, and there was his grave, William Acre, and it said of. I'm not going to tell you where, but it was a hamlet, little more than a farmhouse. So I went there, and there was a woman who had just moved in. She said they'd just bought the house, that it had been left in the estate of a William Acre, and that he had died tragically and alone, while guarding. And there she pointed to tumuli, sand, and trees, and that he would never leave there, not while the crisis lasted. This was 1916. He was there from 16 to 18. Could you believe? And caught TB and died. I went to the tumuli. A low mound, set around with pines. It looked like a ship, if you squinted carefully. Now I'm used to digging. How you can use a fox's hole to dig deep down. And so I started to dig there and then. I quietly in Ipswich bought a shovel. And I would say that I was looking for birds at night and bats to hide my excuses from people. And I would spend all night digging. But as soon as I dug, the warnings began. I would catch him from the corner of my eye, and I would turn and there would be no one there. No one. Just a breeze, I'd tell myself as I dug deep. It was creepy in the night. Sometimes I felt that somebody was tapping me on the shoulder and I'd look round, and the tunnel I had dug so far almost caved in. Or when I'd come home to shave, there would be my razors, cutthroat, open on a page of a Bible, where it talked about the quick and the dead. But I was greedy, you see. Hard-hearted, perhaps. I closed my mind. I dug 3 nights. Until at last, by torchlight, I could see in the sand markings like a nails. And I knew I'd found the ship. Just then there was something like a cry outside, and I looked. And I thought to myself, it's a nightjar. But there are no nightjars, not in Essex. I widened the hole a bit, and I dug deeper. Coming to a little roofed structure, I could see it in the sand as I dug my trench out. Although the structure and the wood was long gone, the nails remained, and I dug into the ghost. And there, in the depths, I found what might have once been a body, and on its head, a crown. And as I touched the crown, something like a scream, remembered over the ages, rang out to the forest, and I grabbed the crown and I ran, filling up the hole as best I could, pulling away all the props, hiding my trench. It was hard work, or it would have been hard work, except the sand seemed to fall by itself, and once or twice it caught the crown, until in the end I really had to jack the crown up my arm. So determined. Fine figure I must have cut, all wide-eyed and muddy. Sand. And in my hand, hidden by a rag, something I could not show anyone. Do you have it? We asked. Yes. I have one of the crowns. The last of the crowns of England. Can we see it? You see, ever since I took it, I've never been alone. He's always there, watching. Knives are left out in my room. Razors. And always, when I turn my head, he's gone. But I feel him behind my back. He's there. Can we see the crown? Said Abner, in his most reasonable headmastery voice. And the young lad came back after a few minutes with a piece of paper which he unwrapped, and he held out an unadorned crown, as they say Saxon crowns were, a perfect silver, wrought, I thought, in the Byzantine manner, with marks that went vertically up from it. Beautiful workmanship, and a single jewel at the front. I reached to touch it, and he said, "No, best not." must go back to God. Now, I was going to tell him about laws of treasure and all the fine things that could be his, but he was so adamant. We agreed that we would come and help him. It was the next night he led us. Now, he didn't show us where. We went by foot, and it was a long way. Poor Long had a blister before we arrived. And then we helped him begin the trench. And we could see the earth had been dug recently. And he pulled it out so quickly. It seemed that some other shovel was helping him. We just stayed on lookout. At last, he let out a sigh. And we saw he had put the crown back, where surely it must have been originally laid, and started to hide. Long said it was such a pity because there was clearly a boat there, the like of which had never been seen, and who knew what kind of crowns or sceptres, spoons or artefacts from that pivotal time before Essex became Christian, at the cusp when Renwild was king. And I said it was a pity, but we would have to go with what our young companion wanted. And then we congratulated him. And he led us some way round and round, and we came back to Aldborough as the sun rose, and then went to an early pub. And he seemed to relax. We said we were going to have a nap, then we'd go golfing, and we advised him to go and sleep. And then we'd come and collect him in the late afternoon and go for a walk upon the beach. And as we went back to the hotel, I saw him jump and look behind him. Just the once. But it was enough. Enough to make him look scared again. And Long said, "It's all right." But he starts to shiver and say, "Are you sure? Are you sure you can let me have the knowledge of where it is?" And we said we were sure. I gave him a very stiff drink on top of the Guinness, and we made sure he was quite asleep. And then we went golf, had a little sleep ourselves, and then went golfing. It was not a spectacular day. We were both very tired, but we came back about 3. And we asked at the hotel after our young companion of the night before. And they said his friend had already collected him, that he had gone out for 10 minutes before. Well, we knew he had no friend there. But the hotel staff was adamant. Although they couldn't describe their friend, someone had arrived and summoned. And our companion had run out to meet him. But if we followed onto the beach, we were sure to find them. Well, we went onto the beach and we saw footprints in the sand. Our friends, we recognised his strange long boots anywhere. And we ran after them. And the footprints seemed alone. But a little way off, Long suddenly pointed. There, wet in the sand, was the footprints of somebody else, even fresher, being caught by the sea. It could only have been made minutes before. One boot, of very old fashion, one barefoot, although the print looked more like a bone. So we ran all the faster, but our friend must have ran with the whips of Satan after him. The sea mist was blowing in. We called him! We heard him cry out, as if he thought we were ahead, not behind, and run all the faster to a little Martel tower, there where the sand became shingle. And then there was a cry that was enough to choke him, borne across the still mist. It was terrifying. We came up maybe 5 minutes later. His mouth was open, but utterly full of shingle and sand all the way down through his lungs. Well, there was obviously some sort of foul play. I think for a while we were in the frame. But the hotel staff said that we'd followed, but a long way after, and people couldn't see how two old chaps like us had performed such an art task. So we were in the clear. His death remains just another mystery. And the crown, let's hope it's still there, guarding the coast. And that no other curious fool ever finds it. Such is my story.